You are listening to I Am Refocused Radio with your host, Shamaya Reed. This show is designed to inspire you to live your purpose and regain your focus. And now, here's your host, Shamaya Reed.
Welcome back to I Am Refocused Radio. Once again, we are here today, and just like any other time, we have another amazing show lined up for you all today. Today, we have a true honor talking to Christopher Wilson. He is a 22-year H&R Block franchisee who has been in the game for a while. I mean, he's someone that is really taking this serious when it comes to how he's been able to operate and give back to his community. He's doing a lot of special work from different offices across North Carolina and Virginia. He is a financial expert and literacy advocate featured on CNBC, BET, and Black Wealth. I mean, he has a long, amazing resume that we're going to just jump right into. So let me just cut to the chase, land the plane, and say, first and foremost, Christopher, thank you for being on the show today. How you doing, man?
I'm doing well, Shamaya. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you being on. Let's start out with your personal journey. You've been H&R Block franchisee for over 22 years, and you've ran multiple offices, and two of them have been top business. And that is something to credit to you personally, because we know that anything that is successful, it carries a lot of weight of how you run your business. So credit to you for doing that.
Well, thank you. You know, there's no saying is how you do anything is the way you do everything. So that's one of the things I look for when I'm hiring people is, you know, how they do certain things. How do you do certain things? And that's one of the hallmarks for hiring, you know, well, and being able to be in the game for as long as I've been in the game.
What has been some of the learning curves along the way? Because anyone who has a taste of success have also been through some hardship as well.
Yes, you know, 22 years in the game, we've seen the financial crisis. We've survived the financial crisis. We've survived COVID. I actually have a T-shirt that I wear from time to time saying I'm a certified COVID entrepreneur. We survived COVID, and I'll tell you, there are a lot of folks who did not come out on the other side of COVID, and that's one of the things that I'm most proud of is how we kind of pivoted during COVID and able to keep the business going. And it turned out to be one of our best years at a point when things were so upside down and inside out.
When you think about, speaking of crisis with COVID, there's also retirement crisis that you explore as well on your platform. What do you, for our viewers and our listeners, what should they know and learn how to prepare when, you know, retirement landscape looks kind of, you know, iffy?
So I'm glad you asked that question. I have been in this business for 22 years. We do thousands of tax returns annually. So we see a lot. We see the good, the bad, the ugly. And what has piqued my interest is what I'm seeing in the African-American community. We're in a financial retirement crisis, and nobody's coming to save us. And so we've got to wake up and realize that, yes, you can work a decent job. You can have a retirement account. You can do all the things that you're supposed to do as it relates to preparing for retirement. But there's one aspect of this that really trips up the African-American community is once you've amassed this large nest egg, the question is, how do you position it in an effort to sustain you for the rest of your life? And that's where we go wrong. Oftentimes, we are presented with products like the annuity product that, when it's presented, oftentimes you'll be called to a dinner or something like that. You get an invite to go to a dinner to hear a pitch. And that to me is the beginning of you being separated from your lifelong hard-earned retirement fund. It feels good to folks. It sounds good to folks, particularly if you don't have any other options or you don't know of any other avenues. The retirement pitch is one that works. And you can tell just by the amount of money that is being poured into these annuity products over the course of the last decade or two. The idea of, guaranteed income for life, that's what those annuity products offer. But what they don't talk about is the purchasing power. Will your annuity be able to maintain the purchasing power? We're all living longer. And if our money doesn't keep pace with inflation, then you're going to live well for a few years, but then all of a sudden you're going to start to feel the sting, and particularly in times like right now, when inflation has reared its ugly head and prices are going up. There's also this affordability vibe that's going on throughout the country. That's a tough spot to be in. If you've annuitized and you've been retired for, say, 10, 15 years, the problem is that number does not change. Your annuity number, the amount you get, or whatever you agree to, that number doesn't change. And we all know that prices of everything continue to spiral up. And so that becomes a problem for the African-American community and later in life. Now you've got to get creative about how you make ends meet. And, I see this, what I call a slow train wreck happening year in and year out with clients that walk into my office and we help them with tax preparation. And so it was that caused me to write a book on how to make your nest egg last a lifetime, and to be able to help our community to understand, hey, there's a different path. And not only will it help you and sustain you for your entire life, but it will also be a legacy for the next generation. Each generation, for the most part, Shemaya, everyone has to start over. And that's what holds our community back as well.
Once again, listen to Refocused Radio and watching us online. Talking to our special guest today. You go to his website, ChristopherAWilson.com. And I want to say what you're doing is very important work. I know I kind of hyped up a little bit in the intro of the interview, but I want to do it again because I think when you think about being able to understand finances, my next question for you is, in order to get the next generation more involved and get an earlier start, what's your best advice for the young adults who are not yet getting to retirement age, but they are still early enough to where they can get started and have a solid plan?
So there's a couple of paths I recommend. For young parents, as soon as your child has a Social Security number, you ought to establish a brokerage account for that child. You can do that. You can start funding that brokerage account in their name, a joint name, with the parent and the child, and offer others to help fund it as well. Birthdays, special occasions, celebrations, whatever the case might be. The government now offers, for at least for the next 4 years anyway, any newborn can set up a brokerage account, and the government will add $1,000 to that. Now there's some restrictions there, and there's limited to what you can invest in. But what the options for investing in, I actually agree with. I suggest that they If they don't know much about how to pick stocks, that's okay. You don't have to. You can buy the S&P 500 and invest in that. The S&P 500 operates a lot like the NBA does. Only the elite players get to play. And when you're past your prime, it's time to go. You got to go. And then you get replaced with the next elite player. So all of that work is done for you. And all you have to do is have the presence of mind to open the account, fund the account, and choose the S&P 500. That's all you got to do. S&P 500 over its history has returned an average of 10.5%. So if you put that money in and you continue to add to it over time, particularly if you start at birth, you can create some pretty good traction for a child that maybe at 18 or 20, they may want to do something with that. They may be able to leave it until somewhere in retirement and, be assured of having at least $1 million or $2 or $1 or $2 million at retirement. The other thing I would recommend for young folks to get started is to consider starting an investment club. Those are opportunities where you can gather groups of your fellow social members, family members, or co-workers, however you want to put a group together. Create an investment club. They were popular back in the 80s and the 90s. I'm advocating for a comeback for investment clubs because I think with the technology that's in place today, it's a great avenue for helping people to get into the market, to participate, to learn, and to earn. Those two things is establishing an account for your child and establishing an investment club, for young professionals will go a long way toward helping our community improve their financial foundations.
And speaking of foundations, when you think about tax strategies that you help with your clients, when you look at individuals and business owners, what should they be using right now as a strategy to help maximize their wealth and to keep more of what they earned?
So the tax laws, first of all, the tax laws are written for owners and not for employees. So there's a lot you can take advantage of. The tax code is designed for people who own things. And so establishing your business, you may start out, most African American businesses are Schedule C. They start out as Schedule C. That's simple, it's easy to do, low barrier to entry in terms of getting it up and running. But the fact of the matter is that's the most highly taxed entity type that you can be involved in. And a sole proprietor Schedule C business is not a bad thing, particularly if you're just getting started. But if you're starting to make some serious money on a regular basis, 50 to 100,000 or more in profits annually, it's time to trade up from the sole proprietorship and move into something like an S corp. And that will save you on average about 3% annually in taxes compared to a sole proprietor. And the 3% doesn't sound like a lot of money, but over a career, that can add up, and it can add up quickly.
You think about actionable steps today for someone who's watching or listening to us right now, whether they are just getting started or they are already well into their 40s or 50s. What are the very first actionable step they can start today? Maybe the first one is to go to your website real fast and look at all the resources you have at ChristopherAWilson.com. But what's something that they can do today to get a head start and say, all right, let's take action right now?
Well, the one thing I would do is I would recommend reading my book. How to Make Your Nest Egg Last a Lifetime. I poured my 2 decades of knowledge into that book. I've written it in such a way that it is not financial jargon. It is plain spoken English. I put terms in there for you to use. You can use the book as a reference. You can read it in each chapter separately. You don't have to read it from front to back. And it is a tool that you can use to help to strengthen your financial foundation. I would say start there first. And then from there, you can get some ideas about how to move forward.
If you had one mind shift that you wish people would have more of when it comes to financial literacy, what would that be? And why is it so crucial for people to really start educating themselves on these topics?
You know, one of my pet peeves, Shemaya, is how and where you spend your money. I hear the term all the time, well, you know I'm on a fixed income, and I'm sure you've heard that from people as well, as the reason why you can't do X, Y, or Z. You know I'm on a fixed income. And so one of my pet peeves is I tend to look and say, okay, you had money to fund retirement with. What did you do with it? Did you leave it at Starbucks? Did you leave it on a cruise? Where is your retirement funding revenue? Where is that? Did you spend too much of it on interest payments for a mortgage? Where is it? And you can look back over your life and figure out where your retirement, your actual should have been used for retirement dollars actually are. And that's an interesting perspective to take. And if you look at that and you look at your daily habits and you understand where you're spending your money, and it all adds up over time. You know, time is your friend when you're young. So the small things that you do compound over time and can have a major impact, be them positive or negative. How you do anything is the way you do everything. And so your habits are a telltale in terms of where you're going to end up and what your situation will be when you reach retirement age. You know, I can look at a tax return and just look at, based on what forms are attached to a tax return, how someone's really going to end up in retirement. You know, they don't have certain forms on their tax return. That's a red flag to me that, you know, you're not headed in the right direction as far as retirement is concerned.
When you think about clients that you worked with over the years, without saying any names, is there a particular story that comes to mind of someone who maybe had some issues with their finances, but with your help, they were able to turn things around for the better?
Yeah, I can tell you of several stories. I could tell several stories of that. But one in particular was a client of mine who had worked for the U.S. government for, you know, their entire career. They got to the point of, you know, okay, I'm ready to retire. I go to HR, I start checking out. Well, somewhere in the process, somebody in HR introduced this person to somebody who sold annuities. And, you know, at government, you got a pension, you got Social Security, and then if you save, you know, through the thrift savings plan, you've got that as well. Someone was trying to get her to annuitize her thrift program, and she doesn't have any kids. She is married. And so she sought my advice on what to do. And, you know, I shared with her what her options were and what the implications of her options would be. And she thought about it long and hard and decided against annuitizing and to keep control of her thrift plan and structure it in such a way that it would sustain her when she's retired. And she's got it set up to where when she does expire, the balance of what's left will go to her church. And that's one story. That's one story about how we were able to help some of our clients. We meet our clients where they are, and we help them by helping them visualize the future or to extrapolate from where they are to where they're actually headed, and be intentional about which direction they're going in.
Once again, this is Refocused Radio, watching this online, talking to our special guest today, Christopher Wilson. Go to his website, ChristopherAWilson.com. When you think about coming full circle, going back to entrepreneurs, when you think about how they are creating strategies to create wealth building strategies for their own selves and protect their own personal finances, what are some of the things that you see entrepreneurs, maybe younger in the business, not realizing that they are not aware of? Because we know self-awareness is key, but what are some of the patterns, if you will, are you seeing with young entrepreneurs?
So with young entrepreneurs, they are interested in starting businesses, but they're somewhat a little misguided about what being an entrepreneur is all about. Let's say, for example, you do graphic design work and you love to do graphic design work and you work for a company that does that. And you decide, hey, I can do this for myself. You go and hang out your own shingle. And once you discover as your own person in business, well, now you're responsible for everything, not just doing the part that you love doing, which is the graphic design. Now you discover that you're responsible for the physical place where you work or your employees work. If the lights are out or if something's broken, all of that is your responsibility as an entrepreneur. And you may very well find out that, well, I only like doing the graphic design piece, but I've got to spend some of my time doing these other things that I don't really enjoy doing. And so whoever they worked for before apparently made it look easy. And sometimes they discover that, yeah, this is really not me, and all I'm really interested in is doing the craft and not the work. So I recommend to anybody who is thinking about going into business is to read a book by Michael Gerber called The E-Myth. The E-Myth by Michael Gerber.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. That helps you to understand that, if you're going to go into business, you want to build an enterprise, and an enterprise that can generate income that's not tied to what you and your two hands can do alone. If you're dependent on just you and your two hands, what you're setting up is a self-employment situation. But what you really want to build is an enterprise that can generate wealth and hire and pay employees to get the work done.
That's great. That's great right there. Once again, listen on Refocused Radio, watching us online, talking to our special guest today. Go to his website, ChristopherAWilson.com. We got about a minute left. So first thing I want to say is thanks for everything that you're doing again. But if you have one last message that you wanted to give to our listeners and our viewers across the globe, really, but particularly here in the United States, what would you hope that they'll be able to not just gain from your resources, but a call to action if they want to go a step further?
I would say, embrace capitalism. If you live in a capitalistic society, which is what we are in this country, is to understand it embrace it, and let it benefit you. We go from day to day, looking and buying products and services, and we just need to be able to not only be part of the economy from a consumption side, but also from an investor side and a creator side. So I'd say change the lenses a little bit and look at things through a capitalistic viewpoint, and let that help guide you in terms of how you go about structuring your financial future.
Like always, been listening to Refocused Radio, watching us online, talking to Christopher Wilson. Like always, man, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Shemaiah.